And the award goes to... The Game Award goes to...
I'm gonna let you finish VGAs, but first, I want to talk about a few things. Happy 2025, guys. We made it, but I think we need to do a little bit of a retrospective on 2024. Because when it came to things like, let's say, video game adaptations, it was a year, you know? I mean, listen, right now we had one of the best live action adaptations I've ever seen for any video game whatsoever. One of the most faithful adaptations I've ever seen in Fallout over here. We had another Sonic movie, of course, with double the Jim Carrey. And then we've got the series that I want to talk about today over here as well. And of course, we've got all these other series.
This wash. How did I get the name? It's in my mouth!
So when it came down to it, the VGAs in 2024 only really had two contenders. Fallout, and of course, Season 2 of Arcane. And there was only gonna be one winner, which of course was gonna be Ella Purnell, because goddammit, she's on a generational run. Every character that she plays, she gives her absolute all to, and honestly, I do not want to see her fall off anytime soon. She is doing phenomenal work. But I've already been familiar with Fallout for more than a decade at this point. I've played every mainline game. I know the lore like the back of my hand. I love Fallout, and I think the series deserved to win the VGA. But the other one, Arcane here, is a series that I took for granted in so many ways. I started it so late, and by that I mean I started it less than a month ago. So when we're talking about ending 2024 off with a bang, I think I did that exact same thing. But I mean, who can really blame me? Arcane, a series based off of League of Legends. The top-down MOBA, for God's sake. If I do play this game, and for whatever reason I lose or I make a mistake, I get called a racial slur or something like that. Why would I want to watch a series based off of that? Yeah, I'm sorry if I sound a little bit traumatized, but League of Legends just doesn't seem like my cup of tea. So that's why it caught me by surprise how much I actually love this series, because I think that every single word spoken in admiration about the series turned out to be true. Every single word of praise, everything that I've heard from a critic's mouth, it makes sense now. Which leads me to say that I'm actually completely, utterly disappointed in all of you for not letting me know that this series was so good. I mean, come on, a little hint would have helped. Yeah, of course, I heard a little thing or two around the internet, but come on. I never thought that it was gonna be this amazing. Who knew that it was gonna take a 21 Pilots TikTok and performance to get me to care about one of the most powerful bromances to ever grace the screen? Because whether they're brothers or maybe a little bit more than that, this is one of the best character arcs I've ever seen. And by adding 21 Pilots to this mess, you took me back 10 years ago to when I was one of their biggest fans. So, thanks, Arcane. You really know how to get a guy to watch a series. The most dangerous thing that the series has made me do is want to learn more about League of Legends, and that makes me teeter-totter on actually wanting to play the game, which I know would be the biggest mistake of my life. So I'd rather sit here and scroll through all these videos about people explaining the lore about all the characters and world building in League of Legends because, you know, I'm afraid to actually dive in myself. And that's what I've been doing recently. And videos like this catch my eye because, goddammit, isn't that the most amazing title I've ever seen? But this is one of the times that I feel have become way too scarce for me. One of the times where I find a series and now I get to eat up every moment of me becoming a member of its community, where I enjoy every second of the memes coming out of it, of everything that people are just talking about. In this moment where the series just ended, it feels so special to talk about it with everyone. It did a fantastic job in making me want to see more of these characters, this world, everything there is to do with League of Legends. This is an advertisement done in the best way possible. And I think the reason for this is because this series isn't just a mindless cash grab like a lot of video game adaptations are. This is a labor of love from the artists to make this series something so remarkable. Every frame of the show is beautiful, whether it be in the normal animation, which is really hard to call normal because of how fluid it all is. Look at this fight sequence over here. Every single movement, how it's choreographed, it's so smooth. It makes things like Invincible look like child's play. This is a series that sets the standard on spectacle. Look at these other sequences over here where they make the series look like a complete music video. Or in other situations, it makes the series look like a work of art because it is. These sequences aren't just stylized in like a fancy 3D graphic model kind of way. These are pieces of art. Artists drew these with charcoal. Caitlin's world over here gets one of the most beautiful artistic pieces that I've seen. The animation of this series is so goddamn perfect that I cannot rave about it more. And by the way, I'm just gonna mention it now. I'm gonna apologize in advance if a lot of the stuff that I'm mentioning sounds like it's been regurgitated millions of times before, because this is my first time watching the series, being engrossed in this world that we're seeing. So for me, this is the first time that I'm actually getting to talk about it. This video, as you can probably tell by now, is just an excuse for me to gush about how much I love every single part of the show. And I wanted to serve as like a message to people that are like me, where they think that there's like such a negative stigma on the game or other things that they just don't want to jump into this series. This is a series that I can recommend with my full chest. I honestly think that you'll love this series as long as you have a few brain cells up there. Because I think that the series deserves so much more recognition, along with the mountainous amount that it's gotten in the past few years, because it is that good. And I have no idea how this series didn't end up being as profitable as Netflix or Riot Games thought it would be. If they say that the series isn't profitable, then by God, I hope that they keep making the exact same mistakes, because they need to come up with more series just like this. Use another $250 million. I don't care. I need more scenes like these. But enough about the budget. The show kept me surprised by how deep and how involved every character is in the story. How every single plot point is intertwined with the other, and any single time a character does anything, it pretty much splinters off and it does a butterfly effect. So much so that it made me think to myself, wow, League of Legends has lore that's this deep? And while it does, it actually turns out that all of the lore is completely different in the show compared to the game. Now, whether that be that they're constantly rewriting stuff and that the Arcane series is going to be canon, or maybe it's just left out of canon entirely, is up to the Riot Games themselves. But this is something that just makes me think that the artists, that the creators of the series had so much creative control over everything that they were able to design every single plot point and make it something really unique and special. There's not a moment wasted in the runtime where it feels like the characters are useless or it feels like the story's not progressing. We're first introduced to Vi and Powder, who will soon be known as Jinx, as their kids, and how one moment, which we don't really think too much about, really changes the course of history. Them breaking into Jace's home is something that we don't really think about too often. It's something that happens really quick, everyone gets out, but it sets the course for the entire story. I mean, that's when the Enforcers come down on Nazan, and it really is the thing that expedites the production of Hex Tech. And it really doesn't hit us until season 2 that the repercussions of that day were so immense that everything really revolved around this one moment. I mean, once we go to Echo's journey in the Arcane verse over here, we realize just how much of an impact our characters had, even when they were kids. Sometimes you gotta think to yourself, maybe Heimding was right all along, even though I made fun of him for pretty much most of his comments. There's not a single thing that's wasted or feels like a missed opportunity in this show. Season 1 has a special little magic to it, a special little spice added into it that makes it nothing short of a masterpiece. And I say that with all sincerity. Silco is one of the greatest antagonists to ever grace the screen. At first, he could be a Bond villain, with how cliched, how stereotypical this evil bad man looks. He's even got that bad eye. But then all of a sudden, once Jinx gets into his life, he evolves into something so much greater. You sympathize for this man, and sometimes you even feel like you might root for him a little bit. But you know deep down that he's one of the slimiest fucks out there. God damn it, I love everything about Silco and Jinx's dynamic. It makes sense as to why she is the most popular character in this entire property. And it also makes sense as to why pretty much every single unstable person I know that knows about the series gravitates towards her. She has that special charm about her, I gotta be honest. And their dynamic is one of many dynamics which make the series so special. Usually in other TV shows, maybe there's like a pair of characters, like the two main characters, or maybe there's like a side group. They're the ones that you care about because they're the ones that we see the most of, or they're the ones that maybe have the most depth to their story. But here, pretty much every pair that we see has that same level of depth. Whether it be Vi and Caitlyn, Jace and Victor, and here with Jinx and Silco, and even later on with Isha and Jinx. Every single pair that we see here, it makes sense as to why they're together, why they mesh so well together, because every single character in this has their own role to play. I bet sometimes you might think to yourself, maybe you're a little bit more invested in Jace and Victor's story, or maybe Jinx and Silco, but then the thing is, if you're invested in maybe one, maybe more than the other, It doesn't really matter because it all circles to the same thing. They're all so connected that at the end of the day, every single one of these characters has a huge impact on the others, whether they know it or not, because these characters stay true to themselves for better and for worse. It doesn't matter. They are 100% accurate. The most complex character in the entire series has to be Jinx. It's easy to really hate on her because it's in her name. She's a Jinx. She kind of ruins everything that she's a part of. But since you get her past and her backstory, you understand why she got to that point. And you understand that she isn't all as malicious as she may seem. Season 2 really comes in by pulling those layers back on her by bringing in Isha, adding to that sisterly dynamic that she's been missing all along and showing us that she is capable of caring for other people to the same extent that they care for her. And by the way, while I think of all these scenes and all these different characters, I think of quotes that they've said all throughout the way, because the way that these lines are written, god damn, they gotta be paid the big bucks on this. I can say one of my favorite quotes in the entire show is Victor's from his last speech, where he says,
"That which inspires us to our greatest good is also the cause of our greatest evil."
A line which I think pretty much solidifies what I think is the central theme of this entire story. The connections, the love that these characters share for one another, they're the things that just cause them to become monsters and also cause them to become heroes. There's no clear black and white to any one of our characters over here, which makes it even more exciting because you never know what to expect. These characters that are so different from one another can become allies in the next second, and you never expected it because it was something that you just never thought of, but it was always a possibility. When it comes to things like standout episodes in the series, I mean, there's a ton to talk about. Every episode in season 1 is phenomenal, but my favorite in that season has to be, hands down, the final episode. Not only does it have one of the best cliffhangers that I've seen in any television show, it also has one of the best adaptations for a comic book too. And you probably already know what I'm talking about, because what Jinx does in this scene over here with Silco and Vi being tied up, this is essentially an adaptation of A Death of the Family. I mean, this is so good. The way that my eyes lit up when I saw Jinx bring that plate up and she just teased that it could be Caitlyn's head, that just felt like something the Joker would easily do. The fear and the uncertainty that all of our characters had in this moment was phenomenal. And the way that it just finishes with Jinx tragically killing Silco. Ugh! It's so good. Silco's death is probably one of the most impactful scenes in all of television history. I would never have given you to them. Holy shit, what a madman, and he sticks to his guns at every point. You cannot hate Silco. He's just that guy. And from here, seeing Vi and Caitlyn hold on to each other as they can do nothing, as they're helpless, to Jinx shooting that rocket, aiming for the counselors. And I understand why, when fans had to wait 3 years for season 2, they felt a little bit, uncertain. They felt like, what's gonna happen? I need to have this now. Because I watched this in a month and I still felt that tension, even though I got to see the second season the next day. It's what it is. My favorite episode in season 2 had to be, I think, what pretty much everyone's favorite episode was, where Echo goes into that alternate timeline with Heimdallr, and also Jace is like playing Dark Souls or something like that. I'm pretty sure everyone's already made that comparison in the past. The reason why is because of how much this builds on everyone's characters. You get to see what happens if Vander was able to give the letter to Silco. You see what their relationship would have been like if they weren't just at each other's necks all the time. You would have seen what would have happened if Vi botched the mission that they went on episode 1. Without Hextech, the world would be so much nicer. Everyone would be a lot closer to each other, and Jace would have probably been expelled from doing his Hextech thing. The world would have been so much more simple over here. And here you get to see more about our characters too, because Jinx, as a character, you see that she actually gets the opportunity to become a leader in her community. Instead of it being thrust upon her as being this revolutionary figure, she actually gets the opportunity to be a figure in the underground that people actually care about. Topside is not funneling in their enforcers and trying to kill everyone, and everything is relatively okay. Seeing Jinx become the best girl in the entire series in one episode is incredible, and seeing her dancing with Echo being spliced with Jace screaming and fighting for his life, it makes me smile a little bit. This what if situation over here explores so much that I don't actually think they're done with this. If anything, they've already announced that they're trying to do spin-offs. They can't continue the mainline Arcane series, but they can do other side stories, and I think one of the spin-offs can actually be based off of this alternate universe. Potentially, My only gripe with this episode is that Heimdallr kind of just poofs out of existence at one point, and then no one really talks about it again. But I guess that's kind of expected, because I gotta be honest, season 2 of Arcane was definitely a little different than season season 1. I'm not saying that it's bad, because season 2 is still solid for me. It's like an 8.5, maybe even a 9. But I still think that it was a season that was heavily rushed. The pacing was off sometimes, and the story just had some big time jumps that they don't really explain. They didn't make anything confusing, but it just made the story feel like it was going a million miles a second. And I guess that this is, again, in part to everyone not wanting to continue the series, so they felt like they had to wrap everything up with a nice little bow at the end. If this series had twice the amount of episodes, they probably would have been able to focus a lot more on each character's individual story. Maybe they would have had a whole season dedicated to those alternate universe counterparts, which is something that I could not be mad about. I want to see more about that stuff. But it also would have allowed our characters to breathe a little bit more too. Yeah, the plotline of season 2 of Arcane kind of goes wild, because we left off season 1 at a spot where we're kind of like, oh, what's gonna happen to the counselors and everything like that. And then by the end of season 2, it's like, oh, okay, we're at an all-out national war over here with like everyone's lives at stake. And I think that the smaller story, the smaller stakes in season 1 are really what makes it a little bit more neatly put together. Season 2 is just so abstract that our characters, they make a lot of sense, and you hate the villains. I mean, by all means, Ambessa's still a character that you want to see get taken down by all means, but it's still not something that hits as hard as like seeing Silco. I probably would have seen Victor becoming a big bad if I paid attention to League of Legends at all, because Victor, as depicted in season 1, was very different than Victor depicted in the game. But his growth makes sense in tampering with things that are completely unknown and him just being corrupted by them. Not only did he become evil mecha tech Jesus, he also became another person on my list for hair inspirations. So there it is. I always knew that there was something more to the guy. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about villains, there's one character that I actually almost forgot about that actually won. He didn't lose anything. He actually won in all of his objectives. And that was the Doctor over here. Because at the end of the day, not only did he get to revive his daughter, he also got the means for immortality, because he was actually able to replicate them from Victor over here. So this guy somehow was able to win it all. That's actually really surprising, because he was probably one of the most low-key characters in this entire thing. But it goes to show you that if you're not paying attention to every character, you might miss a thing or two, because there's so much going on in the story. Arcane as a series is able to just make you care about everyone, whether it be our main characters, every single pair that we've mentioned, or even our side characters. They all have their own little arcs, and even if they don't have too many lines of dialogue, you care about everything they do. Except for her. She's a complete, utter villain that I should have known from the second that she came on screen. Completely detestable. You know, I was surprised by the fact that this show only has like, what, 13 heroes featured in League of Legends compared to the entire roster of like 150 plus. So even though I know that a lot of our other characters are going to be shown in those spin-off series, I wish that there was still more characters and more things that could have been explored here. I hope that whatever happens with the future of the series, that it ends up being at least like half as good as this show. And even if at the end of the series, it didn't really help me understand what the actual story of the League of Legends games are, it got me invested in the whole world, and it made me actually interested in taking a look at the game, which I think accomplishes the goal of the series as a whole. Now, is it going to be a huge mistake if I dive into the game? Probably. I hope I don't end up posting a video in the next few months saying I regret getting into League of Legends. I think for the next few weeks or so, I think my course has already been set. I'm probably going to be browsing the shit posting that I've been seeing on Reddit and just taking a look at all the memes that have been created without my knowing. I've got a whole new community to surf through and figure out. So that's going to be a fun, completely new start to my 2025 right there. And I think with that, that rounds off my thoughts that I currently have about Arcane. What you guys think about it? I'm almost certain that you already love the series. I mean, who doesn't? And if you haven't seen it, don't be like me. Just jump into it right now. You don't need to know anything else. You'll absolutely adore it. Usually at this point, I'd say something like, as always, I was Bayfond. But for 2025, we're going to be trying something a little bit different. So, as always, I was Randy. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.